Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of video presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. The main textbook for this class is ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Mr. Lee Naylor, as you can see on the screen. Alright. The book is fairly complex. There's a lot of code, not a lot of explanation of the code. So I've decided first to go over this book, which I've got a PDF copy of. ProfessionalASP.NET MvcMusicStore by John Galloway of Microsoft and a cast of other characters. That book, for much of it, it relies on what is called the ASP.NET MvcMusicStore Music Store application. So I've gone through part one of that in all these in separate presentations. Part one, which was the overview and creating the project. Part two, controllers. Part three, views and view models. Part four, models and data access. And I just finished part five, edit forms and templating. So that brings us to part six. This is a very short part of this. It's literally 5 pages long. So as it says, part six here covers using data annotations, which are used for model validation. It says we have a major issue with our create and our edit forms. They're not doing any validation. We can do things like leave fields that should be required blank or type letters in the price field. You really can't do that. There is some built-in stuff. All right, and the first error we'll see is from the database. Okay, we can easily add validation to our application by adding what are referred to as data annotations. Now, when we do that, that will require us having a new using statement, all right, and system.data.annotations or something like that. You'll see it in just a minute. So we can easily add validation to our application by adding data validations to our model classes. They allow us to describe rules we want applied. And you can be as granular with this as you want. In other words, you can take a single field and make it do everything you want it, need it, whatever to do. All right. So as it says in this particular lesson, we're going to go through these attributes. We'll make fields required. All right. We can display the name. You know, a lot of times if it's displaying the name directly from the database and you've got a name, you know, you've got a field in a database called first name, quite often it'll be first underscore name, or you'll run the words first and name together. You can change that so you've got a blank space there. You can set string lengths, minimum and maximum. All right. You can give ranges for numeric fields. You can bind, as it says, list fields to exclude or include, and scaffolding. It says allows hiding fields from editor forms. I do want to mention this to you. I'm just going to very quickly type in here ASP.NET data annotations. And you'll notice, as always, one of the first things that will come up is we get this, which is the one that we're going through right now. But we also get this from msdn.microsoft.com. And I've mentioned this before. I'm going to keep saying it and beating this drum. MSDN is the Microsoft Developer Network. All right, so I can come here and you'll notice I get this. And if you say, you know, that's not really a very good explanation. Well, a lot of times the way I start this, I don't like to Google everything. I'll go out to msdn.microsoft.com, click here, and put in ASP.NET data annotations. Hit enter, and a lot of times this will be the best reference there is. All right. So here's adding validation. All right. This is another one. This is a movie model that they've done. That isn't maybe the greatest example, but entity framework code first. All right. I mean, this is all stuff you can get from a Google search. I understand that. But rather than searching the world, right here, I'm searching the Microsoft Developer Network. All right. So it goes through and it's got some stuff in here. You might find that helpful. You might not. All right. So open the album class, and add the following using statement at the top. All right, I think that other than the middle one, that's it, component model.DataAnnotation, I believe the other ones will be there already, but let's check. So I'm going to open up the album class, go back to my code, stop the run, and let's just, oh, we don't even have a run there. That's good. All right, so let's open up the album class, and notice we've got using system, system collections generic, system link, and system web. Right now, what it's telling us by this gray is none of these are actually being used. I'm going to hit enter, type that in. So notice now I'll get mistakes because I already had some of that stuff in there. Oh, maybe I didn't. Yeah, I had. Let's put in the web MVC. Okay, notice it already. Well, it's grayed out. So we've got our component model, and there's our data annotations. That's the key one. I like to put my stuff in here and put it in alphabetic order. To me, it makes it much easier for me to go through here and find out what I may have been using or I may have forgotten to use. You may or may not agree with that. So, next, update the properties to display this. Well, let's look first. What we're telling it is when we're binding in here, we don't need the album ID. I think it's because we're getting that pass from someplace else. All right, so what do we have here? We're going to display genre instead of genre ID, artist instead of artist ID. The string length for the title will be a maximum of 160 characters. The price has got a minimum of 1 cent and a maximum of $100. The album art URL can be only 1,024 characters long. So let's grab this. Let's copy it to the clipboard, go back to our code here, and we're replacing what's in here with this. Now, you don't have to do what I'm going to show you. I like to separate this stuff. So you'll notice all this stuff that's up here is for name. There's nothing special for genre ID. All right. The artist ID is just going to change the name. The title, again, has got an error message because it's a required field. And it can only be up to 160 characters in length. All right. The price, as it says, must be between a penny and $100. The art URL 1024. Whoops, I don't want to change that one. Genre and artist. All right. So again, we just added, literally, we came in there and added some data annotations. All right. Now, before we run this, and we will in just a minute, let's save this. But as we go back to our handout, the author will say, while we're here, So the author says, while we're here, we're also changing the genre and the artist to virtual properties. So we're adding the word virtual. This allows the entity framework to lazy load them as necessary. I've talked a little bit about lazy loading before. When you lazy load, I believe this is my definition. In fact, let's go into msdn.microsoft.com. Talked about it before. And let's do a search on ASP.NET lazy loading. Can you explain lazy loading? Now, notice it's going outside of Microsoft. It's going to Code Project. All right. And it's also from 2013, so it's a little bit dated. I don't know why that's there. Now, let's just take a quick look. Lazy loading is a concept where we delay the loading of the object until the point where we need it. To put it in simple words, on-demand object loading rather than loading objects unnecessarily. My definition for this is when you lazy load, you are late binding. So what you're saying is we don't want this to be loaded into memory until it's actually needed at runtime. All right? And that's the benefit of what we get by changing these. So let's go back and look at our code. This is what this says right now. I guess they already were virtual, but let's just double check. Public virtual genre gets set. Yeah. So they're already in there as virtual. But again, they will now be lazy loaded. All right. So let's save. And the author says here, after adding these fields, let's go in and let's go to create. All right. And let's put some stuff into this. All right. So run the application and browse to Store Manager Create. I think you already know this, but on the off chance you don't, notice, if I want to, when I'm running this stuff, I can go and bring up Create here. All right. And I don't even have to bring it up. I can go here. I can right mouse click on it here and choose View in Browser. All right. Or right mouse click here and choose View in Browser. All right. Just another way that basically I can make sure that when this comes up, I'm running it from the point where I want to run it. All right. Next, we're going to break some validation rules. Okay, it doesn't like something. It says, the model backing has changed. Consider using code-first migrations to update the database. All right, so it doesn't like that. Not sure why, because the error that it's giving me is inside here of MvcStore entities. So I'm not sure why that's the case. Okay, but just to be sure, I'm going to jump back to the code here. I'm going to bring up, because I've got, I believe, hidden in here someplace. Come on. Well, let's go to here. Let's right mouse click on here, manage NuGet packages. So I want to bring up the package. I don't want that. I'm sorry. View, other windows. I think the NuGet packet manager is in here. Package manager console. That's what I want. So I'm going to do a I think they told me to do an add migration in here. Let's double check. Consider using a code first migration. Okay. So I'm just totally zoning out here. Enable migrations. I think what I want here is an add migration. In fact, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to just try and add migrations. Add migrations. And we'll call this data annotations. Object not found. Is it add migration instead of migrations? Okay, there it is. And an update minus database. Which hopefully is going to update our database. Okay, let's again save this and let's again run this and see if we still get the same error or if it comes up now. Now notice that since I didn't tell it to run it from there, then it's going back to the home controller, which is fine. All right, so now I have to go back here myself to Store Manager, Create. Hopefully that fixed the error that we had. I sure as heck hope so. All right, so I'm going to come back here, and it's telling us, let's break the rules. It says let's enter a price of 0 and move off of here. Notice price must be, that's the error that we put in. And if we click Create right now, notice the album title is required. All right. So let's just check a couple of other things here. These are drop downs, so I believe something will always be put in there. But for the title, I think we said the maximum size for the title was, Let's go back and double check. 160 characters. So I'm going to come in here just so you see me do this. 1, 2, 3. That's 40 characters. So that's 40, 80, 120, 160 if I did that right. That doesn't look like it let me do it that way. So there's 40, 40, 40, 40. All right. So let me just grab all these. Don't know why it's not letting me do that, but it's not. So let's paste all those in and put them all on the same line. So even though that's just, it's not showing it, but it's all on the same line. So that's 200 characters. So let's come through here and try to put that in. All right. Now, it does look like it's at least trying to let us do that, which I don't understand. All right. Again, I think it's because it was 160. So the maximum length is 160. So that works. All right. Now the album art URL we didn't make required. That's got a maximum of 1,024. I'm not going to test that. Hopefully you get the idea from looking at the title. Now notice with the title it's required. All I have to do is type in a single letter. And boom, that validation goes away. Here, if I just put in $1, that goes away. So, the last part of this chapter, as I mentioned, it's very short. So we broke the validation rules, testing the client-side validation. Now, I want to mention this to you. I want to say it slowly, but I do want you to understand the fact that, all right, understand the fact that when you do validation on a website, you do it in two ways. You do it on the client side, typically using a combination, if it's a newer site, a combination of HTML5 form attributes and JavaScript and the JavaScript jQuery library. All right, you do client-side validation. Now, it's possible that the user can either turn off JavaScript on their computer, or they can kind of trick the server into thinking it's, that the validation succeeded when it did not. So you not only do you perform validation on the client side, you also perform it on the server side. All right, so the author says here, server-side validation is very important because users can circumvent client-side validation. It's what I just mentioned. However, web page forms which only implement server-side validation have three problems. Okay? This is what I look at, believe it or not, as being the biggest waste. Imagine that if every time you went out to Amazon.com and you filled out some kind of a thing and you said, let's say you put in a negative price. All right, yeah, I want to buy your product, but I want you to pay me for it. All right, if the system didn't catch that on the client, it would be sent all the way over to the server, where the server would have to check it and then send back a message. That would waste server resources. In addition, as it says, the user wouldn't get immediate feedback because it wouldn't be instantaneous. All right, why? Because the user would have to wait for the form to be posted, validated on the server, and then an HTTP response sent back to them. All right. So as it says, fortunately, and it's not just ASP.NET MVC3, I think it's MVC4, 5, etc., all have client-side validation built in with no extra work. So you already saw this. All right. Now that's it. When I come back, we're going to talk a little bit about authorization and authentication. All right, so I will be back with that presentation in just a couple minutes.